Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Last Best Hope for Conversation, your Babylon 5 podcast. I am in the CNC researching to answer the questions. I don't know why we couldn't just send 42 and be done with it. Joining
Right.
me is Karen.
Hello. 42 is the answer to everything, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. And Lou.
Has it been a week already? I can't believe it.
I
I know,
know.
right?
Just another day in the
Yeah.
life.
Yes, I looked, I went, are we doing a Beatles song? A Day in the Life?
Yep.
No, it's A Day in the Strife. Yes, we are talking A Day in the Strife.
It's also
Uh,
the story of my life, by the way.
yes,
This is the story of my life.
yes. Originally aired November 20th, 1995. Sheridan and Ivanova deal with a dispute with the Workers Guild. A probe arrives and presents the station with a test. If they pass, they promise to share advanced technology. If they fail, the station will be destroyed in a few hours. And oh yeah, Garibaldi talks to Franklin about his STEM usage. So I am looking forward to talking to this one as always. Um, I think this is a mixed bag episode, but there were some nice points to talk about. So, ladies first, the podcast mom, Karen, what's your quick thoughts?
I like this better than last week. It was jam packed with story. And I think, again, we're seeing that the guest stars they've been stepped up quite a bit. And I enjoyed seeing Talon back as well. So yeah, just a fairly solid episode. It's not going to be anyone's favorite, I don't think, but it's good. I liked it fine.
Lou, how about you?
Yeah, this felt like a transition episode, or they're just fleshing out the Babylon 5 universe for some of the characters, and it doesn't really have anything earth-shattering in it, but it does have some nice character stuff. I particularly like the fact that even though it makes Londo more unlikable, it also does make his character more complex, because on the one hand, he's got this racial blindness towards towards John, the Narns, but he still has a soft spot for Veer and tries to get him out of harm's way. So he recognizes that he has made some moral, decisions that are, going to affect him negatively, but he doesn't want any of that to wash off on Veer. So from that perspective, I liked it quite a bit. And but my biggest issue is how the Narn respond to the ultimatum that Jakar gets, and we'll get into that in more depth as the episode goes on. The end. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just hit. I'll have to remember to
For a
cut
second
this
there, I
out.
thought you were frozen.
No, I hit the mute button, and all of a sudden in my head was mute on, and I'm
Hmm.
like, Zoom has never done that before in its life.
Uh,
Where the hell did that come from?
I love it.
Who's behind my shoulder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys brought up there is when you think about it, there's a lot of little subplots. So let's get the one that led to this episode. I did pull out my JMS Babylon 5 Bruce Springsteen Babylon 5 script books, and he talked about that there was he was in a symposium and he had talked about all this. There'd been that idea of if someone sent a probe, would it be there as a berserker, right? To test. If you can answer these questions, then we're going to preemptively destroy you just in case that we ran into you, we won't have a problem. And so that kind of, it's a pretty interesting story how he talked about it. And so he kind of weaved that into a story. And I think as a writer, if you want to explore those kind of stories, it's interesting. Um, I don't I don't think that was my least favorite part of the story, though it did drive the Franklin story a little bit. So let's talk about that first. The idea this probe comes, you've got to answer all these questions, and then ultimately Sheridan, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Seems like he would have done that earlier, but that's my nitpick. Lou, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm I'm torn on this MacGuffin for the episode, because on the one hand, it is a kind of a cool idea that this probe is being sent. These probes are being sent out to uh, basically trick other intelligent races. So that raises some very interesting questions about whoever's sending these probes out. But on the other hand, the conclusion where Sheridan deduces that this is in fact a feint is kind of weak. I think it was, what if they just ignored the probe altogether? Like, it's kind of like, but like, as you mentioned, it does tie in a little bit with the Franklin's Stim storyline. So it was okay from that perspective, but it just didn't really, I don't know. It's an interesting idea for a couple of minutes, but not enough to sustain a whole episode, I think. So I basically just sort of ignored it like everybody else did, I guess, during the episode as well. So yeah, it was okay.
Karen?
Sorry, my mic was weird.
Okay.
So yeah, you use the word MacGuffin. That's perfect. It has no relation to Babylon 5 in general, I don't think. I do appreciate that Sheridan figured it out. I do think he would have figured it out sooner. I mean, it was pretty obvious that if you're supposed to give all this information to a probe that, just randomly happens upon, they want the information. That's what they're trying to get. And it might have been an empty threat that there was a bomb on it. It might have been, they did scan it and found that it did have a bomb on it. Or, it could just be something that gets thrown out there trying to, mine information. It could have just said, hey, thanks for the information, and then moved on to somewhere else to get information. So to me, I thought, there's a lot of holes in that plot. Why would it blow up? Why would they make it blow up? It could have just gotten whatever information they had, and then, oh, this is enough information, thanks, bye, and then off to the next place. If that was its goal. And I do understand what they're saying in that, it gets all this information and then it destroys whatever has a certain amount of information in order to stop that race from advancing. It's a rather weak plot. I think, although that was supposedly the A plot, I think it's honestly not. It's the rope that everything else hangs off of. And I thought to myself, well, that is really weak. And I think Susan would be too smart. I think Sheridan would be too smart. I really think that they would glom on to what's happening earlier. I do, however, like that it shows that Sheridan is not happy with having to have these meetings with all the, the ship, the people coming in and out, having to pay more fees and all that. I think that's the important part of this. is that he's having just to justify scanning the ships for weapons or having them pay higher fees. And he knows they don't want to pay higher fees, so hopefully they'll submit to getting scanned for weapons. I think that is the bigger takeaway from that plot line. And they just kind of threw it in like, hey, it's going to fly under the radar, but he's having to scan for weapons. And having him and Susan kind of spar over that, the fact that neither of them are happy with having to do that, the fact that that dude comes at him and he's playing the tough guy, which I like. I like it when he's that kind of tough guy where he palmed the energy pod out of the gun, but he still does show bravado, giving the guy the gun, taking his weapon, knowing the dude's not going to shoot on him. So I did appreciate that part of the storyline. The fact that they overpowered it with this other storyline, I think they're trying to sneak it under the radar for us. So that was my thoughts on that storyline.
One further thought, Jesse.
Yeah, please, Lou.
It just occurred to me as Karen was talking is the other thing with this probe that doesn't really make any sense is that if its intent is to wipe out other races that could pose a threat, it's not big enough or powerful enough to do that. All it's doing is pissing them off, so that they would in fact come after whoever sent this probe in the first place. So that's a big flaw with this whole idea as well.
Yeah, my thought was this was a old race that had done this and had set this out, and it was kind of following its own pre-programming. But I do want to go back to, right, there is as far as the station thinks and the world thinks, there is no longer a war going on. Right? The Centauri Narn war has ended.
Right.
So why?
You mean the station at large, right?
Yes, that's exactly. So,
right.
And everyone, in the general population. So why, if we're not at war, are you scanning us for weapons? Why are you so worried about security? We're at peace. But John.
I just assumed it was to do with the Narn resistance.
That's a very good. Yeah, that's a good thing. And yeah, I love that scene. Obviously, we all have major crushes on Bruce Boxleiter, and anytime him and Susan can go back and forth is always a highlight. But the idea, of this guy, you a big man up there, you a big man, and then just asks for the weapon. I love that he palmed basically gave them an unloaded gun and called his bluff, and the guy, like, I was just talking, just called this bully, and then back, and Susan's just, why are you doing blah, blah, blah? And he's like, what is that? And then he's like, you're driving me crazy. Oh, would you prefer I gave him a loaded gun? I mean, he is just having so much fun with him. I love that. Any thoughts on that scene, Lou?
I questioned why both of them were there. I thought it was established in previous episodes that this was the type of role that Sheridan was passing on to Susan to increase her portfolio. So I understand from the character point of view what they did in that scene with Sheridan and the talking down that rabble rouser, but based on what the show had established in previous episodes, I was surprised to see both of them there, and it doesn't seem like a wise use of their resources. So that, it was a nice Sheridan character moment, but I just kind of thought, okay, but we already know he's a tough guy, so this isn't really showing me anything new about the character, and I guess that's my biggest qualm with the whole scene.
My thought is that because this is it's the guilds and everyone, they would say, no, we need to talk to the top guy, right? So, and I'm thinking in my mind canon, Sheridan wants it to get close enough where then he can say, okay, Commander Ivanova is going to take it over from here. We've gotten a basic agreement. But yeah, I think that's interesting. All right. So, um, in real world, Stephen First was given the option to star in a Fox situation comedy. I do not remember which one. If I guess I could go and look at IMDb and look at the time period. So,
I
according
don't think
to,
it went anywhere because I
yeah,
looked and the only things he's in are cartoons at that
okay.
point. But I do remember seeing the news that he
Yeah.
might be leaving Babylon 5.
And so, JMS says that they had the right to tell him no, but that's not how they play.
Mm-hmm.
So they once again, I think one of the really gifted writers take this and play with it. So his point is, okay, we can let Steven have a chance, and then I make Londo even more alone as he's going through this dark place, so I can serve that. Um, I thought the scenes were really well done with him explaining to Veer, like women might even find you attractive. It will take some time, you know? And I thought the scene between Delenn and Londo was, in his mind, they were friends. And she, I think maybe a little too harsh, just a little bit, because I think of where he is now. She isn't giving him the benefit of the doubt, and they talk about that. So, um, and then we see, they don't say goodbye or anything, but you can see Londo is very sad to see him low, and Veer is is not happy about the promotion because he really feels like he's abandoning Londo when he needs it. So, Lou, let's start with you first. Let's kind of go through this whole and take it wherever you want, the Veer, Londo, Delenn situation.
Yeah, I've mixed feelings about this. Not in terms of positive and negative, but just more like in a because I did like the whole storyline, but there's my um feelings towards Londo are even more crystallized in in terms of not being able to forgive him what he's done. But I did appreciate the layering of his character in that he, like as I mentioned off the top, that he's got this thing with the Narns where he basically just wants to eradicate them from the universe, but within his own sphere of influence, he realizes what he's doing has moral questionable implications, and that he's protecting Veer from that. So he does have this range of compassion that's maybe just limited to this Centauri's. Maybe if he was with other races, he would, or had opportunities with other races, he might show this some sort of virtue or mercy as well. But he has this very big blind spot, which has led to an almost total obliteration of the Narn. That is just not, in my mind, forgivable or redeemable. So the fact that you thought the scenes with Delenn were a little bit harsh, I thought they were spot on. She doesn't approve of what he's become or what he's done, and even before this conflict started, I don't really remember them having a lot of scenes together. I think they had a couple, but I don't think they ever really conversed on a more social, intimate setting at any point. So I did like that scene quite a bit. And I was curious when this whole storyline, because it kind of came out of the blue, and I thought, is this due to something in real life where First had to leave the show or wanted to leave the show? And I was hoping for a scene between Veer and Lanier, because we had that one quick little scene with them sort of meeting together and complaining to each other about their bosses. I thought, which was great. So for him to go to the so there's so many races to keep track of.
Minbari. The Minbari homeworld, yes.
To go to the Minbari homeworld is interesting, and I'm curious, and don't spoil it for me, if he's coming back on the show at all, because if he does, it would be very interesting to see how his character has changed because of his experience on Centauri. I was really hoping that he was going to become sort of like an operative to help out the Narn, or a liaison or something like that. So I'm still hoping that somehow that's going to happen. And we'll just have to see how that plays out. And of course, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious how they're going to handle it, because now Londo doesn't have a sounding board in that he had with Vera to, externalize his internal thoughts. And I don't know how the show's going to handle that going forward. Is it going to be another new character, another Centauri aide? I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward to see how Londo is going to be portrayed, and how who's he going to talk to, because he's, like you said, he's pretty isolated now. So that'll be interesting to see how that proceeds as well.
Okay, so I looked it up, and Stephen first went. No. It has nothing to do with the show.
Okay.
Stephen first went to a sitcom called Misery Loves Company. It was short-lived, and oddly enough, Christopher Maloney was in it as just a tiny little character. Apparently, it's under the and these people. Christopher Maloney, who people know from SVU. But yeah, it ran from October 1st to October 22nd, and that is a very short run indeed. So yeah, the part between, I'm going back to the show now. The part between Londo and Delenn, I took it as perhaps he voted on her side a lot in the council meetings, that, he's always kind of been behind their causes and that sort of thing, because we did not see him talk personally with Delenn very often, if at all. I mean, I don't remember any specific important scenes between the two of them alone, at least. I might be wrong. I mean, Jesse, you can confirm or deny, but I do appreciate that Londo is, he says that it's because Veer is a stone around his neck. And I think honestly, it's just, he doesn't want to get Veer more embroiled in his problems. He knows he's kind of worked himself into this corner. He doesn't have any choice anymore in what happens on the station as far as the Centauri are considered, and he feels like he could save Veer by sending him to Minbar. I'm sorry, Minbari. I want to say it's Minbar because they're called the Minbari. I don't know why, but so
I think it is a Minbar.
Is it? Okay. But he wants to send him there as, the liaison, and I don't think he has any intention of using that to his advantage. I think he literally just wants Veer out of his mess. And I think some of it is he doesn't want anyone there to remind him of what he's done, how bad he's been. And I did appreciate that storyline. I thought that was well played. I think also Mira Furlan played it well as Delenn. She was not enthusiastic about talking to him. She was very hesitant. She didn't like where it was going. At one point, you're asking me for a favor, but I'm not really on your side. So there was that. And then when she realized that he was talking about Veer, I do wonder if she knows that Veer and Lanier talk. I don't know whether they do or not, because it feels like it's kind of on the down low. But she doesn't see this as any kind of detriment. She sees that it could be good for Veer it could help the Minbari, you know, kind of have this person there. She doesn't really see any impediment to doing it. So I think she sees it's all upside, and that, you know, she's going to go ahead and allow that to happen. I really like that part of this episode. I don't think it's my favorite part, but I feel like it's more true to what we've learned about those characters than the probe storyline. So
Yeah, I think one of the things you both touched on, right, is and I agree with you, Lou. Now that you mention it, she's probably just about the amount of coldness. Um, you know, I'm looking here at IMDb, and there's the quote where Londo says, "I know things may have been somewhat difficult between us for some time, Delenn. That is most unfortunate. I feel sometimes as though I've lost a friend." And Delenn says, "I think you've lost more than a friend, Ambassador. That is between you and whatever gods you worship."
Mhm.
Um, you know, burn, a Minbari burn, right? But no, I think it's true. And um, the idea that he is asking a favor for Veer. And I do get the feeling that when she needed a vote, similar like in our, you know, for our in our Congress or Senate or something, you know, like, hey, I'll support your policy. You owe me one later. That could be it. Um, and the idea, and she does say, right, that maybe it has been open to, you know, the ambassadorship. Remember, just a few episodes ago, they wanted to replace Vera, and Londo pushed that he was absolutely too vital. So he is promoting him up, right? Like he couldn't just get rid of him after making this point. So he's got to kind of like often if you have someone in your department that isn't fitting in well, you find them another job that hopefully gets them more money and more prestige, and then you get them out of your way. Um, I think that, and even though we know this was driven by real world things, it works perfectly. Is Londo knows that he's on a path. We've established that because he sees it's too late. You know, he talks about that. And we did not go back, we didn't cover if just in case as a viewer you were starting to, well, maybe Londo's not that bad. You watch him just horribly humiliate the new um Narn representative, right? Are the streets safe? Well, the ones that are left, yes. And oh, are the executioner killing continuing? Yes. And the workhouses, like, progress, it's good. And then, you know, he talks to Veer about you have to break their spirit. It's not enough that we destroyed the planet. And this is, if his soul is dark and light, I mean, Londo's soul is almost consumed in darkness at this point. And so, any thoughts on that little? I mean, it's just horribly sad to hear him doing it. But any thoughts about that? Because we didn't cover that discussion, either of you.
yeah, he does say to Veer that he has to get rid of their pride.
Yeah.
I think it's also any kind of hope. He doesn't want to allow them to have hope.
Sorry.
I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. Is he doing it for some altruistic reason, or is he just reinforcing his position? It doesn't, I mean, the Veer part doesn't redeem him very much to me. It's a good thing that he's doing for Veer, but I think he already had that soft spot for Veer that doesn't mean much to me. But, you know, he does. I appreciate, what's his name? Nafar.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate his strength when Londo was questioning him, and it does show the fortitude and the backbone that the Narn have. So I liked that. I don't see it redeeming Londo at all to me.
Any thoughts, Lou, before we move to the Narn storyline?
Well, this is a part of the episode that just cemented my, disappointment in what the Londo character has become since the beginning of the series. And I know that they've touched upon it in the beginning of the series that, like when Morton came and first asked Londo what he wanted, and he went into this whole spiel about how he wanted the Centauri to, reign supreme in that. So that could be the justification for, or not the justification, but that could be that's the mindset that Londo had all the time. Yet I feel like with this particular scene, there's something more personal for him going on here about why he hates the Narn so much. And I don't know if this is something that is going to be revealed going forward, and something maybe happened with his family against the Narn. Maybe he lost a relative or something. I don't know, but I'm just spitballing. But it just seems like they really pushed his disdain of the Narn a lot harder here than anything that we've seen before. And I'm just wondering what the motivation is for what's causing that for him. And maybe it's just what we've already seen and it's nothing further, but I don't know. It seems just a lot more personal for some reason in this particular speech that he had. And maybe it's just a racial prejudice thing. I don't know, but I was a little taken back by the how much venom he displayed or showed in that scene. So I don't know if it's going to be addressed further, but it was tough. Even with how much I don't like the character now, it still was tough to watch him go through that tirade with Veer, and then I'm sitting there and I'm going like, Veer, why do you want to stick around? This guy is bad. Like he's gonna stain everything around him. Like you should be happy to get out of there. So I'm really somewhat taken aback by that scene. I if there was any scene that I think was unnecessary, because we already witnessed all of the bad things he's done, this one just really caught me off guard quite a bit, and I'm just not really sure what the reasoning behind this was. So I don't know.
Well, I agree with you that part really kind of cemented that for me, and it might not have been necessary. I do wonder if he thinks if G'Kar dies, his death at the hands of G'Kar would be subverted. He had that death dream that
Right.
they're both going to kill each other. If
Yeah.
he gets rid of the Narn, I mean, is that his underlying reason for doing that, to try and kill off G'Kar so that that's not how he dies?
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I like
It's
that.
just a thought. I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting thought. And the idea of, you get the feeling Londo has forgotten where he came from, except he has gotten, I guess the better phrase is visions of grandeur, right? Now then he is this, and he has the upper hand, and they're not going to let him forget it. Which leads to they send a new person to replace Citizen G'Kar. And this is the guy is saying, I'm looking for his name.
Nafar.
Yeah, Nafar, right? That we got to get along to go along to get along, right? That this is, yes, we're losing all. I'm not going to worry about my pride. All I'm trying to do is to get some food to my people. Yes, we're going to have to take crumbs from the table, but we're going to have to just take whatever crap they give us till another day. And Jakar, on the other hand, is no, we must keep fighting. We must keep pushing. The only way we're going to get freedom is by pushing away. And the Centauri, being the truly jerks that they are, have promised they're going to start killing the families of the people on the station that are still back at Narn if Jakar doesn't surrender. So we get this whole storyline, including the return of Delenn, which was the same actor that Bruce. I did not recognize him, but when him and Bruce Boxleiter him and Sheridan had the drink at the bar, that was the Narn he was tracked with, right? That he was trapped with.
Right.
And so I thought that was a nice return. I love Talon's statement about I have a sword, but you have your words, and that wonderful quote. So, Karen, let's start with you. This whole Narn storyline, and ultimately the people on the station choose Jakar, not Nafar. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's reinforced by Jakar's actions over the last few episodes. He has shown the other Narn on the station his fortitude, that he is working for them. And I think that's been culminated here, that they get that this guy is on their side. The other guy's an unknown quantity. And the fact that they want to send Jakar back to Narn means that they will execute him. They have there's no doubt in their mind that they will execute Jakar at some point. So, and it might be we didn't execute him. He just died in this accident or whatever. Russia. But anyway, they see what's coming and they think this guy is going to stand up. This guy is going to be on our side. This guy is going to fight for us. And I think that's why they take that chance and call their bluff. Now, their families might end up getting hurt, but at least they know that while they're not on the Narn homeworld, they can work to affect some kind of change. On Babylon 5, they're safe, quote unquote. So I thought that was really, really good. I do like that Jakar was going to take the bullet for them, save their families and go back to Narn. That, again, it shows his fortitude. Nafar also had fortitude. I think he was just doing what he was told to do. And Delenn, that dude, we saw how, he's a good guy because of how it worked out on, what was it, All Alone in the Dark? That he and Sheridan worked together to get out of their situation. And also it's kind of a full circle moment. He offered Sheridan his sword back on that ship when they were taken hostage. And now he's come aboard. He has mentioned that, you allowed me, I'm doing subtext here. You allowed me to keep my sword. You used yourself to get off. Now I have my sword again, but I already know that you have your words, your deeds, and that's just as powerful as my sword. And it also kind of mirrors the beginning of the episode where they show that Sheridan can stand up to someone with a weapon and use his words to stop someone in their tracks. And I think that's a very powerful thought, that not only are swords and guns weapons, but words are weapons. And Sheridan has shown in this one episode, he's shown it in other episodes, but just in this one episode, it's strong that he doesn't need a gun. He doesn't need a sword. He doesn't need whatever a backhoe, whatever that dude was holding. He doesn't need any of that to get his point across, to I don't know, to figure things out, because he ultimately did figure out what was going on with the probe, and that was through words. They didn't destroy the probe until he got out somewhere. His solution was to just call the bluff, not to shoot at it, not to wait for it to attack, just call its bluff. So I thought that was reinforcing a lot of things, and I do like the actors. Nafar was played by Stephen Macht, and if you look him up, he's been in a lot of stuff. You'll recognize his face right away. Mm-hmm. And he was in an episode of Scarecrow Mrs. King. I'm loving all these Scarecrow Mrs. King tie-ins. He was also in Castle. So it's something that, I feel like, hey, it's a guy we know. But I mean, he's recognizable instantly, probably by 99% of people that watch television or whatever. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, it was a good storyline. I think that was my favorite part of this episode, was the whole Jakar, Narn, Talon. I mean, it was all kind of, I say Talon, sorry, Farscape. So yeah, I really liked that.
Yeah, and you mentioned Sheridan's use of words. They specifically talk about Jakar use of words, and that I thought that was really well done at the end, where, we need you here, you can't leave. Okay, I've got to go. We need you here. And I'm not quoting them directly, but everyone had said the same thing, right? They had specifically had band together to say, we can't let this guy go. And I love that. Lou, your turn. What's your thoughts?
My favorite part of that whole story thread was when Garibaldi showed up at his quarters, Jakar's quarters, and said, "Look," he says, "you can't go because they're going to kill you." And it's just a great beat between those two characters. Jakar respects and likes Garibaldi coming out and stating what, and it's a great device also for the story in terms of, maybe not all the audience members are cluing into what's really going on here, but Garibaldi just, lays everything on the table so that we understand that the stakes of what's going on here are really high. And it's just a great scene between these two characters. And I just thought that Jakar, he just played that scene, and Andreas played that scene just beautifully. His reaction to Garibaldi's, imploring him not to go was just, the best actors do things without saying words, and he's got all this prosthetics on too, and it's just, it was just amazing to watch him do that scene. I really love that scene. I got two more things I want to say about this whole thread line. The one thing that I thought was a little suspect was that every Narn on that ship was in agreement that they wanted Jakar to stay. They were willing to place their families in harm's way. I find that a little hard to buy, but for story purposes, you have to hand wave it. So that was, the sentiment of, it's better to fight against, imprisonment is better than living a life of as being a slave. That's, it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. That's that Milton thing that is out there. So I can appreciate it from that perspective. But, in a show that does a lot of nuanced character things, I would have loved a scene or two where the Narn contingent had some arguments between each other about whether or not they were willing to sacrifice or put their families in harm's way to do this. But I understand, you've only got so much time and budget, so you can't do everything. But I think it would have added a nice little extra texture to that whole dynamic. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but during that one conflict that Jakar had with Nafar, and the fight was breaking out, or no, I'm sorry. During that scene where they kept on stopping Jakar, there was like in the background, there was like a stairway, and at the top there was a figure up there. Did you guys see that, or was that just? And I thought, is that Garibaldi? Is he watching this whole thing? Like, if you go back and watch
Mm.
that scene, there's somebody in the background on that during that whole sequence that maybe it's just a poster or something. I don't know, but to me it looked like Garibaldi, and I thought he was watching the whole thing. So that was an interesting shot selection for that. I don't know if it's going to pay off down the road or something, or maybe it just was unintentional and it just happened to be like that. But yeah, there's definitely somebody in the background, and it looked like Garibaldi to me, but it's not clear because he's not in focus, and that figure is never in focus in the shot. So I found that very interesting as well.
I will have to go look. To my mind, Lou, um, the Narns that don't support Jakar just didn't show up. So there were enough there to show him
But
that
then it would have
most
been it
of
would have
them,
been nice if they had shown that too.
yeah. I think the idea is they stayed in their quarters because they're
Sure.
not going to
But
like,
we had no idea of
yeah,
how many of them there were. So
no,
I
we
just
don't.
assumed everybody
Yeah.
there was everybody that was there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's a good question. We don't know how many. I Yeah, I agree with you that this was just really beautiful to see um the humbleness and the idea of it's better to, we got to be in search of freedom. There was a goof. I saw this on IMDb that uh Talon had drawn his sword before and not drawn blood, but I do think that's a nice ritual about that. And
How,
it was a
how
very
did you read it when he took this sword and sliced his palm with it?
the idea is supposedly that bl blade cannot be shed, cannot be put back in until it's drawn blood. So therefore, he had to cut himself so that it would taste blood.
Hmm.
And I know that's a trope in, I'm looking at the picture Karen just saw. Yeah, there is someone in the background.
And it looks
Uh,
kind of like Garibaldi.
yeah, it does a little bit. Yeah, I can
Good
see that.
catch, Lou.
Yeah, really good catch. Um, but yeah, I think the idea, that is often in fantasy novels where a sword will have a curse on it where it can't be re-shoved until it's killed someone or bled someone. So
I
that's what
like
I
that.
took
I
that
like
at.
that because it means that if you draw your sword in uh, haste or without proper circumstances, then there should be a price to pay, and
Yes.
that would
Yeah,
really apply quite nicely in today's world as well.
it really
Agreed.
would. Yeah, it was.
And also, it kind of also mirrors that scene where Jakar cuts his palm and says, "Dead, dead, dead, dead,
Yeah.
dead." They're not afraid to shed their own blood if it's for
Yeah.
something good.
Yeah, and obviously this is even we know the sitcom wasn't successful, but they had negotiated that they would be able to use him again, so that even this is not a permanent end to the character. And if that's a spoiler, I'm sorry, but once again, you can look at the DVD box and see the faces of people who are on there,
True
right?
enough.
Yeah, good. Um, I did want to bring up a few years ago, you were able to purchase um, um, little bitty um, postcards and sayings that for like a little place card or something with quotes.
Hmm.
And there's a ton of them. And one of them you could buy was Susan saying that if I survive, if I live through this job without completely losing my mind, it'll be a miracle of biblical proportions. You can buy that in a postcard kind of that is a great line. And then I love Carwin. There goes my faith in the Almighty. He had a couple of nice little lines this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. It's
That
kind of like,
yeah, like
I
when
like that actor too.
yeah,
He's funny.
yeah, and like when um Susan says, "Always find the good in any situation, huh, Captain?" Being sarcastic, and he goes, "Absolutely. If I didn't, I might end up like you." And
yeah.
then Carwin's like, "I didn't hear anything." Yeah,
What's that supposed to mean?
yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
love that Susan turns to him for confirmation and he's like, I'm not getting in the middle
Yeah,
of this.
exactly. Yeah, I know nothing. I see
I
nothing.
see nothing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. What else? Anything else we need to cover?
Well, we haven't talked
Uh,
about Franklin yet.
yeah.
Oh God, that's yes, exactly right. I forgot. All right. So, um, I I think I know the first sign of having a problem is not admitting you have a problem. I think another, if that isn't lying about having it, if that isn't step one, it's got to be step 1A. And Garibaldi kind of sees that he's dead on his feet, has to go to work in 2 hours instead of being smart and trying to grab an hour and a half, 2 hour nap, which you could make the argument would make it even worse. I do know that argument. If my wife is someone who can't nap for 2 hours, it will just make her horrible. He takes a Sims and a stimulant. And Franklin makes the argument they're legal as long as they are administered by a doctor. But is he doing his own prescriptions? Is he going to one of the other doctors there at Babylon 5 and being treated, worked? So this is, and Garibaldi is very concerned. I do love the idea, well, that's because you're a drunk and you see everything having a drunk problem. I think that is a legitimate, point of view. So, um, yeah, Karen, let's start with you. We'll finish up talking about Franklin and does he have a problem?
Yeah, again, I'm not enamored with Franklin. I like that actor very much, but Franklin is so irritating. I like the fact that the girl he was going after was his wife in real life.
Oh, I did not know that. That's
which was cool. Yeah. And the fact I understand Franklin saying to him, "You're a drunk, so you see everyone is having this problem," but there was a clear sign that he was using Sims when he was tired at the table. He went off and all of a sudden he's back and he's happy and he's awake. So I think Garibaldi was 10,000% justified in his actions. I think it was definitely showing that, and he had several scenes in this episode, and it reinforces the fact that when he's a friend, he's a friend. He doesn't want to see Jakar leave. He doesn't want to see Franklin get too far down this road. He's behind the people that he appreciates. And I do think it was important to show that storyline in this episode because he had to get the medical information from the person, and the person was like, "I don't have it all. You're just going to have to deal with what I have." And he's like, "We're going to die." I would have been meaner to that woman and said, "Get it for me. If you don't get it, then, maybe I'll shoot you." I don't think he could, but you know what I'm saying? It was just rude of that woman. I completely understood where he was coming from. I know he was irritable because he was tired. I'm also one of those people that cannot take a nap unless it's like 4 hours. If it's any less than that, I'm groggy afterwards, so I get it. But he is a doctor, and even in today's world, doctors go on no sleep. I don't like that fact, but they're kind of used to it. And I don't like that he's having to rely on stims when he knows that his profession's like that. And I'm sure he built up this tolerance for not sleeping. I think he's relying on the stims more because he's kind of depressed over what's going on. And when you're depressed, you want to sleep. That's one of the main symptoms of depression. So I think a lot of things are working against him here with the stims. And it also, you mentioned that it's okay as long as you have a prescription. Wow, is that relevant? Because we have a huge oxy addiction problem here now. And the whole justification is, well, I was hurt and I needed it and I got a prescription, and it's making it very difficult for people who actually do need those drugs. It's a bad, horrible thing that's happening. And I always love when there's a parallel between the show and real life. And Babylon 5 does it more than most shows. So, it was a good storyline. He's irritating. The chick was irritating. I loved Garibaldi's part in it. And it was definitely kind of an I keep using under the radar, but it wasn't like the main focus of this episode, but it was a good beat.
Yeah, I think this thread with Franklin is still setting something up that's going to happen in the future episode where he's going to crash hard. What I really liked about this episode, this story thread, was I think it showed more about Garibaldi than it did about Franklin. Franklin's in denial, and as we've already said, most users are in denial. But what it showed for me for Garibaldi was that his instincts were correct in his read on Garibaldi, and if it had been anybody else but a friend of his, he would have pushed to make this person face their their addiction, or he would have to take some sort of legal or security action to make sure that this person didn't become a problem. But Garibaldi falters when it's a friend, because he wants to he empathizes with them, and he wants to be their friend. So it was very interesting to see that play out, because like I said, if it had been anybody else but Franklin, Garibaldi would have been on that person's ass until he went into rehab or something like that. But with Garibaldi, or with Franklin, he let it slide because they're friends. And I think that shows a interesting character trait for Garibaldi, that he's at his best when he's objective and can stand outside of his own feelings about a situation. Whereas with Franklin, he's letting something happen that normally he wouldn't. So I like that from that perspective. And maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think that, like, because this whole Franklin thing's still not resolved, I think it's going to set up something more tragic in a future episode and how Garibaldi reacts to that will be interesting to see as well.
I absolutely agree that, Garibaldi has a blind spot for friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he has to.
It's
we've
human.
established,
It's human nature.
and we've established, right? Like you live in a very strange world, Mr. Garibaldi. And the idea of him going to Jakar and trying to convince him not to go, to having Franklin over to eat, and trying to keep it casual. And just expressing concern. And he even says that if I wasn't your friend, this would be a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
As head of security, he could, and it's very vague, the security for this station. Like, does he, like, I know they established in Star Trek that as the medical officer, right, chief medical officer, the head physician has the right to call any, like they can say the captain's unfit for duty.
Right.
Does Garibaldi have that authority as head of security there, or is he head of just the police? But I think
I think the question would be, doesn't Franklin have that authority to override command or security or anybody?
Yeah.
But we haven't really seen that explored yet.
So I think the idea is, right, there is a lot of vagueness in this in the right kind of way. So he believes him when he says, "Hey, I don't have a problem." Good. I'm glad to hear it. But he lied, right? He
Mhm.
did have that problem. He did have to,
He does have that
and
problem.
yeah, and also, right, he took it to reduce the stress, not because I haven't had time to sleep. He was under a lot of pressure and he needed that jump, not just necessarily like I get that when, okay, I need something to keep me awake, so I'm going to drink extra caffeine, or in this case, a controlled substance. But this case, he just needed that shot of adrenaline because of everything that was pushing him on, which is dangerous. I do love the fact that Garibaldi said, "You're a control freak, just like me. You take shifts when you don't have to.
Hmm.
You don't rest when you can. You have to do everything yourself instead of trusting the people that work around you." So I think this is a very interesting storyline. And of course, I'm spoiled because I know what's going on,
Hmm.
but I think you guys will be pleased with as we move forward with this. Okay,
Cool.
good.
Alrighty.
All right. Now then, anything else? Thank you for calling me. I'd totally forgotten that we hadn't talked about Franklin, and I was planning to have that last.
Yeah.
So, all right. Anything else?
I
Mm-mm.
guess for me overall, this episode doesn't stand up to the level of the previous ones because the other ones have set up more interesting threads that with the new Ranger
Yeah.
characters and all that stuff that's going on. That's far more interesting than what's going on here. But I do think that the Franklin storyline and maybe down the road the Veer storyline will pay off dividends, and it will definitely be interesting to see how Londo is going to behave going forward now that he's got no one to confide in.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll start because normally I don't. I always let you guys go first, and then we kind of having someone else grade first can adjust sometimes. Um, I think because I think individually there are some really good storylines. Um, and so weave together, they make a solid enough episode that I'm going to give it 7.5 silent goodbyes. Karen?
Oh, that was sad
Yeah,
when he looked back at Londo and Londo's just like, go.
yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna give it 7 Kataks,
Ooh,
which is
nice.
the name of that sword.
Ooh, good. All
Cool.
right.
Um, I think I'm going to give this 7 V'gers.
Okay.
You get that reference.
Yes,
Yeah.
I thought of that. In fact, when I said this was done by an old, civilization, I thought of that possibly. So yes, very well
Star
done.
Trek 1.
Yes. Great. Karen, I do remember I emailed you. Do you have it up? Do I
I
need to pull it?
do. I have it.
Okay. All right.
Just 1 minute. Sorry.
Texas a la shot is ahead of us. So when I get them, I've been forwarding because Karen and Lou both said they don't read it till after.
I do not.
Yeah.
I have it up, but I did not read it yet.
Yeah.
So it's from Texas on the Shock, as you said. They say, what a descriptive title, and it fits so perfectly. Most other places, it would be a day in the life, but Babylon 5 causes more problems than it solves, so it's a day of strife. It brings to mind one of Ivanova's lines from season 1. I'm in the middle of 15 things, all of them annoying. The main plot is the alien probe, but the more interesting plots are the one concerning Jakar and Londo. Here we start to see what kind of leader Jakar truly is. He is working for the good of his people, and if he feels that he himself is an obstacle to that, he will remove himself from the equation. But as a consequence of his devotion to them, his people have become devoted to him and convince him to stay. Talon, in particular, is great here. On the Centauri side, Londo decides Vir needs to be sent away for his own good, of course. There's a real-world reason for this. Stephen First had gotten a role on another show, so he couldn't be available as much. In universe, Londo wants to get him away from, quote, what needs to be done, unquote. He gives some contradictory answers to Delenn, but I think it's mainly because Vir says things Londo doesn't want to hear. Part of it is also that he wants Vir away from potentially dangerous situations, because for whatever reason, they do actually care about each other. Vir's biggest protest to leaving is that it would leave Londo alone. And Franklin is not very clearly descending into addiction. He manages to hold off at one point, but at the end of the day, with all the stress of dealing with patients, obstructive people on Earth, and thinking they might possibly be dead in a few hours, he just can't resist. That woman irritated me, by the way. If I thought I was hours from death and someone told me there's no need to be rude, I just might jump through the comm screens and throttle her. Again, we're on the same wavelength, Texas.
Yes.
And at the end, the whole thing was just because, as Franklin put it, some alien race was yanking their chain. Don't hold your breath on ever finding out who. All right, Texas, do you need to do that to us? You're pulling a Jesse there. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Until next time, can't tell you what's happening. You wouldn't believe it anyway. This is the Texas on the Shock signing off. In Valen's name.
Absolutely perfect. Good deal. Anything on the YouTube channel that stands out, Lou? I know we're getting a lot of discussion about the details.
Yeah, I just 2 points. Generally, they agreed about the direction of that episode. Was a cut above the other ones, and my comment about Jakar's restraint in the elevator scene with Londo also generated a lot of discussion, both pro and con, as to why he was able to show that restraint. So thanks everyone for those great posts.
Yeah, I like it when it's like they want to join in the conversation. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like to see, other points of view. So very cool.
And I'm
Keep
still
it up.
convinced that Londo Jakar showed a lot of restraint in that scene that I was not expecting. I just think they should have pinned him to the ground or something, and that would have worked so much better. But that's just me.
Yeah, there we go. All right, wonderful. If someone wants to find more of your fine work, Lou, where can they?
Well, our fine work is up on the YouTube channels at Lou's Review, where you can find these Babylon 5 podcasts, along with our Stephen King podcast, my writer's podcast, as well as our JKL media podcasts that we do one-offs on short-lived or short-run series or books or music or whatnot. And there's lots of fun stuff up there. Go check it out. And on Twitter, I'm at Lou W. Sitzma. I also have a S King podcast Twitter handle, but I lost access to that, and I'm trying to regain it. And if you're wondering why that feed has been kind of quiet the last couple of weeks, that's why. It's a long, slow process for me trying to get it back.
Well, good luck on your quest, Lou.
Thanks.
Karen, how about you?
I am at Aleveria, Aleveria, on Twitter and other places. My blog is aliesstuff.com.
Well, I am at Jesse Jackson, DFW, on Twitter. I am really proud. Coming up on June 6th, I have a interview with Warren Zanes. He wrote a Tom Petty biography. He was one of the writers on Tom Zimany's Elvis documentary that came out a few years ago. He's worked with Garth Brooks on some photo books that Garth has done. But the reason it is immediately pertinent to my fans of Set Listing Bruce is he wrote Delivery from Nowhere, the making of Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. And Warren was a wonderful guest. I felt a little worried because he has done tons of press for this book. I am like the third or fourth Bruce Springsteen podcast he's been on, but I think we had a pretty good conversation, and I'm really proud of it. And so it will be out on June 6th. So in the meantime, please email us if you have feedback at, here it is, JKL. No, yes. Why can I never remember this? It is jklb5podcast@gmail.com. And let us know, like text us on the shot, what you like what we're saying. And if you don't like what we're saying, we promise to take it with a humble heart. So Karen, Lou, another one in the books. This is a lot of fun. If I remember correctly, next week's episode, Passing Through Gethsemane, is one of my favorite episodes of Babylon 5. So spoilers a little bit, setting the right expectation. And a few years ago, Brad Dourif was going to be here in Texas for a convention. I ended up not going, and the only thing I would want to talk about is he is the guest star next week.
Cool. Well, I see it's directed by Adam Nimoy. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a fun. It is a good episode. I won't say it's a fun episode, but it's a good one. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But for now,
I have to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have Babylon 5 on the same drive that I have Ted Lasso episodes.
Yeah.
And I have it set to, go to the next episode automatically because I put Ted Lasso on in the background.
Yeah.
And I have to physically stop myself from allowing it to play when I watch Babylon 5 there. So it was difficult. The title of this next episode intrigued me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. All right, we will be back in a week. Everyone, be kind, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye. And scene.
That was a fun one.